like to welcome Tom Noie, the Notre Dame beat writer for the South Bend Tribune. Good afternoon, Tom. How are you today?
I'm doing awesome. It's almost basketball season, so I'm doing even better.
Well, let's talk basketball. When you
Yes.
look at Notre Dame's roster, the name that stands out the most, at least to me, is Dane Goodwin, leading return scorer, Jerry West shooting guard preseason watch list. What does he bring to the table for them?
Kind of a steadying presence where you don't really recognize what he does out on the floor. He doesn't jump out at you and say, that's going to be a guy that's a 15 to 20-point game, a score for a team like Notre Dame. So kind of a steady guy, and was really so steady last year up until about mid-January, late January, early February, to where he was looked at as a first-team All-ACC guy. But then once his name got around the league and his name got to the top of the scouting report, that's when other teams in the ACC really keyed in on him. And it was hard for him to get shots. It was hard for him to get open. It was hard for him to be that consistent scorer that he had been most of the season. But he's a really good basketball player. You look up at the end of the game, he's got his 15, he's got 16, he's got 6-7 rebounds. He often played last year as the second big, even though he's about 6'5", 6'6". So just a steady, really good college basketball player, and kind of like the textbook basketball player that comes through these programs with Mike Brey, to where he gets better and better and better, to where he's a junior, a senior, this year a super senior, to where he just doesn't leave the basketball court because he's that valuable to what they want to do out here.
What does that say about Notre Dame basketball? I think you said it perfectly. You get better under Mike Brey when you get there. And how does he go about it? And I mean, can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's funny you say that, because they're coming off their first one and done ever in program history in Blake Wesley, who showed up and was going to be one of those guys where it might take 2 years, it might take 3 years, it might take 4 years. They don't put a lot of pressure or expectation on guys coming in, because you're not going to get, when you come to Notre Dame and when Notre Dame recruits, you're not going to get the kind of kids and the kind of athletes and the kind of NBA prospects that wind up going to Carolina and Duke and Virginia and the schools around the ACC and the schools that ACC teams play. When you come to Notre Dame, you're allowed to maybe to take your time, grow your game. If it takes a year, if it takes 2 years, sometimes it takes 3, 4, 5 years, where guys know they're not going to play a lot as freshmen. They're not going to play a lot as sophomores. They're allowed to kind of round out their game, experience what the ACC is all about, experience what college basketball is all about, to where it gets to the point where when you're a junior and a senior, you're playing 35, 37, 38 minutes a game. So they know that, they like that. And then every once in a while, you'll get a guy like Blake Wesley, to where you look at him in February of his freshman year and say, that guy's a pro.
Now, you think in February of this year, you might be able to say the same thing about J.J. Starling?
Not only J.J. Starling, Ray, but they have another freshman that not a lot of people are talking about in the ACC in power forward, Van Allen Lubin. He's 6'8", 230. If the season started tonight, I think for the first time since Mike Brey's been here, he will start 2 freshmen in J.J. Starling and Van Allen Lubin. Van is already the starter. It still remains to be seen how Mike Brey wants to handle what happens on the perimeter with JJ. But if they played tonight, Van Allen Lubin, 6'8", 230 from Orlando, Mike Brey had chances, so many chances in the offseason to kind of build back the roster from a power forward standpoint, because they knew they were losing Paul Atkinson, the one-year grad transfer who came here from Yale and had a phenomenal season. And they were 99.999% sure they were losing Nate Laszewski. Like, Nate Laszewski, all through his senior year, was kind of on the Prentice Hub arc as far as saying, I think I'm only going to be a 4-year guy, and I didn't picture myself being a 5-year college guy. I'm ready for the next challenge. So they figured Nate Laszewski was going to be gone. When Nate came back, they still had chances to go into the portal and get a power forward to kind of bolster that front line. But Mike Brey told his assistants, he said, no, absolutely not. We're not going to go with the quick fix. We've got a kid from Orlando in Ven that can come in and start as a freshman. So with JJ and with Ven, you might have 2 of the top 4, 5, 6 freshmen in the ACC this season.
You know, one guy who I don't think anybody talks about who might be the one guy you want to root for more in college basketball than anybody else, is Robbie Carmody. I mean, what he's gone through after being player of the year in Pennsylvania in high school to what he, the injury factor throughout. Can you talk about how he's persevered through all the trauma he has gone through?
Well, it's something where he's probably the most asked about player in this program, where if I'm having a Notre Dame men's basketball chat, if I'm out on the street, if I'm at a game, everybody wants to talk about Robbie Carmody, because he was a top 100 kid coming out of high school, coming into the program at the same time. Guys like Nate and Prentice Hub and Dane Goodwin all came in together. That was going to be the freshman class that was going to kind of bring Notre Dame men's basketball back to the 2 Elite Eight runs that they had in 2015 and 2016. And I mentioned JJ Starling starting and Van Allen Lubin starting. Robbie Carmody started as a true freshman. He became the first true freshman to start for this program since Turin Francis did in 2003. So that was, I think, when that was a 15, 16-year gap between starting true freshmen. That's how good they thought Robbie Carmody could be. Freshman year, he injures his shoulder. Next year, he's going up for a dunk when the game is basically over at Maryland and blows out an ACL. And then subsequently, while rehabbing that injury, he cracks his kneecap. So I don't think we're ever going to see the Robbie Carmody a lot of people thought they were going to see. But just the fact that he keeps coming back, wants to practice, wants to be a part of this basketball program in any way, shape, or form. He's basically a student manager, an assistant coach on the floor, a good locker room guy, because his body has totally betrayed him to the point where he's not going to be an ACC caliber guard, but that's okay with him. He graduated last year. He's working on his master's. And as long as he can be a part of the program, whatever that entails, Robbie Carmody is saying, you know what, coach, I'm all in.
That's a huge pat on the back to the entire Notre Dame family, starting with Mike and working down. It's to be able to, some people would have just jettisoned him off. You're not going to help me, go somewhere else. But they've kept him, and I guess that's why Notre Dame's a special place.
It's been hard for Robbie. It really has. And just dealing with the fact that he was such a high caliber basketball player in high school, and then he gets here and it's been one injury after another. And it's hard to watch him in practice, because it gets to the point in practice where he'll participate, and then you see he's got to go over in the corner and ride the bike, or he's got to go over in the trainer's room and work on his body in that regard. He can't do much 5-on-5. So it's something where Mike Brey has said, I know you're never going to give us what you thought you could give us, but we're here for you. Whatever you need us, however we can help with you, you can still be a part of this basketball program.
One last question. As good and consistent as Notre Dame has been under Mike Brey, why do I think they're always overlooked?
Because of the league that they play in, Ray. Even this year, like, nobody's talking about the fact that they have basically 5 super seniors in their rotation, in Dane Goodwin, Nate Leshevsky, Cormac Ryan, Marcus Hammond, who nobody really talks about Marcus Hammond as being an impact transfer. There have been times this year where Marcus Hammond's the best guard in practice for this basketball team, and those are with guys like JJ Starling, we talked about, Cormac Ryan, and Dane Goodwin. So it's something where everybody wants to talk about Carolina and what they did last year in getting to the national championship game. Everybody wants to talk about Duke and Mike Krzyzewski not being there anymore. What's Duke going to look like with John Shire? How about Virginia? Are they going to look more like Virginia this year? So all the attention, Virginia Tech, can Mike Young keep it going? All the attention in the ACC is always on those teams, and Florida State, and hey, is North Carolina State going to be any good? And Mike Brey couldn't have wanted any other way. Like, if you start talking about Mike Brey's team, and when I told Mike Brey, I said, you know what, I picked you 3rd in the ACC preseason poll. His basic reaction was, don't do that. Like, be quiet. Go cover football. Go cover Marcus Freeman, because we want to kind of just sit here and hide and not be talked about and not be in a poll and not be considered one of the top teams in the ACC, because we want to work on our game in November and December and early January, and then have teams, other people around the country, look up as February becomes March and say, wait a minute, Notre Dame is 24-11. Notre Dame won a school record 15 ACC games last year. How did they do that? Like, that's when Mike Brey can do his best coaching jobs is when nobody's talking about Notre Dame men's basketball.
Sneaky good.
Yeah, sneaky good, and sneaky old.
Well, if you want to follow Notre Dame sports, there's no better person than Tom Noie at the South Bend Tribune, Noie NDI on Twitter. Tom, thank you so much for your time.
Ray, you got it.
Take care.